I'm on the streaming site.
Okay. Okay, I think we're live. We'll give a few minutes for people to pop on. Hello, everybody. Hello, Science and Magic. If you don't know, my name's Amanda Levesque, and my specialty is working with high achievers, with workaholics, with people who are really in love with their careers and helping them to find a way to have both vitality and their love, which is their careers. And today I have one of my rock star clients, Lucy, with me, because I just find that in our one-on-one sessions, she has so much wisdom to share and she's so articulate about her experience. So I really hope that this live stream today gives you some nuggets if you are also a high achiever, high performer, and you struggle with balancing self-care with your love of work, that you're able to leave with some, ideas or perspective shifts around this integration. I'm a high achiever myself, and I'm always in a dance with this. Like, what does it look like to bring my body to work? Hi, the self-care experience. It's good to see you. Yay, hearing and seeing us clearly. So if you didn't know, we had this scheduled last week and it was my first live stream and it just kind of tanked. The audio wasn't coming through, so we had to reschedule it. But I'm excited that you can hear and see us. So with that being said, I want to let Lucy introduce herself. And Lucy, you can share a little bit about what you do, as well as kind of how you identify as a high achiever and what that looks like in your life. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm so excited. It's such a pleasure to be here with you, Amanda. So I, in my main practice, I help people really understand and manage their psychology so that they can make behavior change in their lives. In my main business, I help people in the area in particular, of weight loss and achieving their body goals, because there's so much like psychology and emotional things and beliefs tied to your relationship with food and with movement. And so that's been a passion of mine, especially since I've had a long history of struggling with food, with body image and beliefs around all of that. I also host podcasts to help people have conversations with people, usually things around self-discovery and how to find your path in this world. And I love having these kinds of conversations. And how I would identify as a high achiever is really, to me, sometimes work feels almost like a game. And the thing is, when something feels like a game, like, you're always wanting to achieve the next level and beat this boss and ascend, and it can be fun, but the fun can quickly develop into stress, right? If you push yourself a little too much. I mean, even people who play video games get really exhausted if they play for 6 hours, in a row. And what happens is I've seen this recurring pattern where I would start doing something for fun, or I'd be really excited about a new content I'm creating, or a client I'm helping with or something. And it would start out really fun, but then I would start kind of pushing myself to do more and more, and get into a state where I feel like I need to outdo myself. I need to keep outdoing myself, like what I've done before. And at some point it starts feeling unsustainable, but I keep trying to push through it anyway. And eventually it will lead to burnout. And then I would recover and the cycle would start over again. And at a certain point, I'm like, I'm good at recovering after burnout. I'm always able to pick myself up, but I started questioning, what if I don't even need to what if I don't even need to get to that burnout place in the first place? Oh, interesting idea. And around that time, I started finding your work, Amanda, and everything on your page kind of spoke to me, the thing with oh, what if work can be delicious and rest can be productive and time gets to expand for you instead of feeling like it's crushing you. All those things just really resonated.
Yeah. I always say that I'm not the coach that pushes you to the next level. I'm actually the coach that kind of slows you down in a way. And high achievers don't like to hear that. They don't like to slow down. But it helps you to embody your work more. And you touched on this really important point that it's a perspective shift too. It's like we can be doing something that feels fun. And then because of the energy of striving, it turns into work in not a fun way. It turns into a burden. And it's this perspective shift and this neural rewiring that I work with my clients on. And you have just been doing this phenomenal job around embodying some of these concepts. So before we dive into like the ins and outs of transformation, what I'm curious about is a lot of high achievers. And, if you're watching this live, definitely feel free to use the chat. You can hit the like button and interact with us. There will be a time to take questions. It can be organic, or maybe at the end I'll pose a time, but thank you if you're tuning in for being here with us. But I want to dive into this fact that, like, as high achievers, often we know what's good for us. We know the information, we read about it, we agree with it. We're like, I should find a way to have a sustainability within my work and my well-being. But when it comes to actually implementing that, there's a block. There's some sort of like, to actually sit down and do what I know is good for me, or to actually do that, because work pulls us in this almost intoxicating way. And then we leave our bodies behind. And so what I'm curious for you is, what did that look like? If you knew all of the things or some of the things, maybe not all of them, that were good for you, what was your block towards actually implementing what you knew in your mind into your daily life and into your body?
Yes, that is such a good question. And I actually was just journaling on this the other day, because I've noticed a huge shift. Like, I'm actually doing the practices now that I said I would do. And it wasn't that I didn't think it was important before. I knew it was important before, but there was a part of me that was in survival mode, I would say, when it came to work. When it comes to work, the best way I can put this is, I had always felt like, even though I was enjoying and passionate about what I was doing, there was always kind of this low grade fear that I have to check certain boxes or meet certain bars, especially deadlines. Like, I would set deadlines for myself, and if I didn't meet them, or if I feel like I wasn't going to meet them, it would feel like I would be a failure. And then everybody would know what a failure I was, and I get kicked out of the tribe, going back to our very, evolutionary driven survival instincts. You can't get kicked out of the tribe. You'll die. I realized that was a deeply ingrained part of me. And I mean, from a very young age, I found value in achievement. And I know this is a part of my belief system that was conditioned. And that has kind of carried over into my work. And so what used to happen was, when I feel myself, first of all, I usually, I'm already feeling like I'm falling behind, because I set a lot of high bars for myself. But even if I wasn't, the fact that I had to do something that wasn't work related, that was like taking care of myself, felt like I was taking away from work. Like, I was taking away from my service to like something that I felt gave me a bigger purpose, something that I felt that, that I should be doing, like a good person. Like, it gave me moral value, like, oh, I'm a good person because I'm helping people, I'm doing good work, right? And it gave me like a sense of purpose. And then there's also, the survival instinct of making money and all of that, right? Like, there was so much wrapped up in this work that anything that felt like I was taking from it felt like a sin. But I will tell you what changed is, as I've been doing this work, first of all, I'm not in survival mode as much anymore. So I'm able to zoom out and actually see clearly the bigger picture, see that when I'm taking care of myself, it amplifies my energy and the way I show up in every single area of my life, including work. So I'm able to zoom out a lot more. Like, when I'm stressed, I'm like, okay, I'm not seeing reality. So like, get out of that, calm myself, calm my nervous system, feel safe. What does reality actually look like? And it's so different when you're not in tunnel vision mode. So that's like the first thing. It helped me see reality more, so that work is just one piece of my life instead of like the most important thing. The second thing was, once I was able to zoom out and actually start practicing the embodiment stuff, the yoga exercises, some of the tools we have to calm the nervous system, I saw the evidence that it really actually did impact my work in a positive way. And now I see self-care as my work. Like it's the same thing. It's like self-care is such an integral part. Like before, I was like, oh, I don't have time to do self-care. Now it's like I don't have time not to do self-care, because if I don't do it, everything else just gets lower in terms of like quality, and I feel bad. So it's like a lose-lose. So I think kind of knowing that and really internalizing it and seeing it happen has convinced me at a visceral level, not just at like the intellectual level.
Mm. Yeah, what I'm hearing you say is that your sense of worthiness was tied up previously in what you were doing and what you were accomplishing.
Yeah.
And because of that, every time that you took a break to be still, or to let your nervous system recoup, or to do something that sparked joy, you had this rub of like, well, then I'm not worthy, or I'm not aligned with my purpose in this moment, because my purpose means doing and not being.
Yeah.
And meshing this, like when I'm being, things are being done, is this beautiful space to be, but it takes a shift in belief system, which I've watched you do in a really short amount of time. Can you explain, kind of reframe what you've learned about rest and how, it's not actually taking a break from work, but how it's adding to work? Like, what does that actually look like in a tangible level? When you are more rested, what ripple effect does it have in the output of your work? Because I think rest just in and of itself is valuable, but to reframe it for high achievers, often it can be helpful to show how rest is actually productive.
Yeah.
So that when we take that midday break, we're like, well, this isn't taking away from anything, it's adding in this way. So maybe you could share with viewers what that looks like for you.
Yes, definitely. I mean, first of all, I think I think earlier I said rest is work. And the reason why I say that, like this is, and I'm going to try to explain it to the best of my abilities, because the shift kind of happened a little slowly, but when you are resting, when I feel I'm at rest, when I'm not in survival mode, I get so much like ideas and input and create inspiration, and it all makes sense. Like I think what I said before was like I see a different reality when I'm in a more restful creative state versus a focused survival state. And you do need both. You transition back and forth between both of them, but I think I was like 80% in the stress and survival state and like only 20%, actually maybe even less. And so that's like way more balanced now. And for high achievers, I would say that there was actually a lot of research done on this. I think there was a research done there's this concept called focus mode thinking and then diffuse mode thinking, where the most successful people or the tend to be able to switch between both of them. So when you're in focus mode, there's like one problem and you're solving it, and like exactly like what the destination is, right? So it's like it's okay, to be single-mindedly focused on that. But then in diffuse mode is where you like get more creative. Like, so if you've been stuck on a problem, which happens a lot, and the funny thing is when you're stuck on a problem, it puts you more in survival mode, because now you're like, oh, I'm falling behind was like a phrase I used all the time. And I stopped using that phrase now, because it's not about falling behind. It's about you're making room for something new to enter that can still get to support you. So when you are stuck on something, one of the best things to do is actually to get out of that focused state and into a more diffuse state of thinking. And that can only happen when you're not in survival mode. And this is where rest comes in. It helps you zoom out and pay attention. And it gives you like pay it like sensing the world, which helps you be more open to ideas and inputs from everywhere else. And your brain, like they actually found that your brain is actually still actively working even when you're resting and you're not actively thinking about something. There's stuff going on in the background. And and I like to think that when you are resting, it's like you're handing the problem over to like, you're like handing the problem over to something like outside of yourself, like, or you're handing it over to your subconscious, to other parts of your brain or to something outside of yourself. And the answers get to come to you in that way. I can't tell you how many times I took a nap and then the answer came to me. You know what I mean? And I've seen that enough times that I'm just so convinced that it's like such a big, important tool. Like it's actually a tool now that I use. And to be honest, I almost feel like rest. I think you mentioned something about like I had tied my purpose and my belief to, what I can do. And that's also shifted. I'm like, now I feel like my purpose is actually keeping myself in this state where I am receptive to all these inputs and be able to, and because only in that state of being receptive to all that input can my best work, shine through in the way I show up to people.
You are offering so much wisdom, so many gems. So I want to touch on this survival versus creativity aspect. Mm-hmm. And for viewers and listeners, think about if, you're out on a hike and you see a mountain lion. What's going to happen in the body? The body is going to get a ton of energy and it's going to either run or try to fight the mountain lion. Probably not a good idea, but run away, most likely. And the eyes are going to be hyper focused on every single little bit of information around you to make calculated decisions about how to survive, to solve problems in real time as you're running. And what happens when we're in survival mode in our work is that we have that same hyper focus. So when you're being chased by a mountain lion, it is not the time to lean back, to widen perspective, and to dream about the future. It is time to focus on avoiding the threat at hand. But what happens is when we reach a state of survival like this in our life, triggered by something that's not a threat to our existence, maybe a threat like an annoying coworker or an email that you received that is not ideal, the stress response is activated in the body. And you start to become hyper-focused as if there was a threat, and you think from a different state of being. So what Lucy's describing is when she rests, she widens that perspective. She leans back and she's able to see her full surroundings. And in that way, the brain is firing in a harmonic pattern. It's working as a whole. It's not firing in fragmented patterning. And because of that, these really ingenious ideas have the space to come through. They're not going to come through if we feel like we're being chased by a lion. And when the body's constricted, when it's braced, when the jaw's tight, I think many of us can kind of resonate with the fact that the best ideas come when we're not looking for them, when we're driving, when we're taking a shower, when we're in a yoga flow. So really what I work with my clients a lot on is, what does that environment look like? And how can we create more of that space and make it so that the nervous system feels safe? And so thank you for sharing that, Lucy. It's just a beautiful way to describe why rest is actually productive, because it moves the nervous system out of a state of survival and into a state of openness and receptivity, where the best ideas come from. And it feels good too. It feels good to be rested.
It does. I resonate with everything you said. And I love the way you connect the dots of all of this. It makes so much sense. By the way, working with you has made me just appreciate my body and my brain so much more, even though my brain sometimes causes me so much angst. I'm like, you're trying to protect me. Like, oh my goodness, thank you. Like, I don't agree with everything, but thank you. I wanted to say that I didn't mention this, but one of the biggest things it's helped me with is with dealing with the people who I work with, my clients, of course, but also like my business partner, my teammates, because when you're in that survival mode, sometimes they can say something Like people around you can say something, sorry, personal life too. Like it extends everywhere. They can say something, you can get an email and read one thing that feels like maybe an attack or feel like you're being criticized. And I've had moments where I went off and did some yoga poses, came back and told myself, I can see that, like, I'm willing to see things differently. Read that same email, and suddenly it's like, oh, they're trying to support me. They're trying to help me. It's not criticizing me. It's like, I see this is, you do see different realities when that perspective widens as you were talking about.
Yeah. And that's an example of an internal stressor. So we have the external stressor of the email coming in, but then the internal stress is our belief about that email. And when we're able to move the nervous system out of a state of survival and let it know it's safe, and then consciously shift our perspective around what meaning it has, then it can shift our response to stress, and it shifts our whole reality and our whole experience. But to do this, I think having nervous system education is really important so that we know what's going on when we're stressed, so that we can feel it and work with it. And you, Lucy, have such an amazing vocabulary around your experience of the body. It's beautiful to witness. I'm wondering if you might share with viewers what stress feels like in your body, not in a story way, but what sensations are occurring when you feel activated or triggered.
Yes. So there are, for me, there are 3 signs that I notice. And the first one is the sense that, well, first, the most obvious one is that my brain will just be firing on all cylinders. Like, so many questions start popping up. And it's just like, it's bouncing off the walls. Like, it doesn't matter what the questions are. It's kind of when I notice that my brain just has so much questions, that's like one of the first signs. And a second one, and this one is shows up all the time, and it usually precedes the thinking, which is that I feel this tightness in my chest. It's like there's a sense of tension. Sometimes it's in the middle of my chest, sometimes it's a little bit towards the back of it, but there's always this kind of tension. And it feels, I call it energetic constipation. Like, it feels like there's this pent up energy and it just really needs to be released. And that pressure, it feels really painful, or not. It doesn't feel like actual painful, but it feels like this pressure, and it makes me feel really uneasy about it. Like, it's like an emotional pain. So that's the second thing that I noticed happening. And then the third thing that can happen depending on the degree in which I'm stressed is I notice my breaths get more shallow. I'll know it because I will suddenly really be in like, feel that I really need to take a deep breath. It's like, I need a deep breath, like right now. And that probably is because I've been breathing really shallowly, that my body is like, I need oxygen now. But almost across the board, I will feel the thoughts running, and then the heart, the chest tightening. And I specifically make this kind of motion because that's what it feels like. It feels like there's like this drawstring, and it's being drawed out. And then it's like all parts of me are kind of like putting pressure in the center of my chest. And it just needs to be like released. And in fact, that's exactly what it does need, is to be released. As we talked about, when we get stressed, there's this huge surge of energy, right? Because we need to run away from whatever is threatening our survival, or fight it. But when it's just a freaking email, like, it's not like I can attack that email, so it just gets stuck there. And that makes so much sense. And I do think that understanding your physiology and what's actually happening helps a lot with this understanding, and then being able to work with it.
100%. And if you're viewing this live or in the comments, I'm curious how stress shows up in your body, what it feels like, what happens in your physiology. If you want to share with me, I'd love to hear that. I love having conversations around body-based learning versus the mental learning of stories. I think what you said, Lucy, about this, there's this mismatch between how our nervous system has evolved to be with stress and the types of stress we're experiencing. Like we don't need that surge of adrenaline to approach an email that feels triggering to us. That would be advantageous for us to run from a mountain lion on a hike, but not necessarily. There's a mismatch there with, receiving an email or getting a weird interaction with a coworker or whatever else happens, sitting in traffic. And these physiological responses, they have a purpose. So the brain increases in psychomotor speed when we're stressed out. And this is that we can process our environment at a really rapid pace. So that's what happens with that. The chest tightens because the heart starts to beat really, really fast to pump blood to our extremities so that we have superhuman speed and power to face whatever threats at hand. And, I titled the thumbnail of this YouTube stream that stress can be your friend. We often think of stress as this bad guy, and stress is horrible and bad. And we think of stress, we think of premature aging and all of these things. So when it shows up, we can feel a lot of guilt or we can feel bad. How do you interact with stress differently now that you've learned about the sensations and the physiology around it and the reasoning behind the different sensations? What does it look like for you when it shows up in your body?
Yes. Yeah. Well, what's interesting is when we've done a lot of practices with yoga, especially especially Yin Yoga. I think that because I've never done Yin Yoga before or restorative yoga, where basically you have to hold a pose for a very, very long time and then release it. And when you're holding a pose, especially if it's like a difficult pose or a pose you're not very used to, it can trigger the same stress, kind of stress responses. I may not feel the chest tightening sometimes, but I'll feel the physical stress in the area of my body that I'm holding. And what was interesting to me was that I realized that this sense of stress, this sense of tightening that I feel like in my hips, if I'm doing a hip stretch, feels very similar to when my chest tightens up. It's kind of like the same physical sensation. And yet when I'm holding a pose, I say, okay, well, this doesn't feel very good, but I can choose to either shift into an easier pose, or I can just stay with it and see what happens. I don't treat my chest tightness that same way. When that comes in, I'm like, oh, I got to get rid of this now. It's what you're saying. Like the thought is like, oh, stress is bad. Like, I'm like, oh, my chest is tightening. I'm not feeling good. Bad. What to do? And I was like, oh my God, it's so interesting that I treat these two things so differently. And that kind of drove me to think, what if it doesn't have to be so different, right? What if when I experience this, I can either shift it into a different pose or release the pose, right? Which is like by releasing the pose, I mean like the saying that stress doesn't serve me right now, so I'm gonna take care of myself, calm my nervous system, and remember that I'm still safe is like the best way of doing that. But when it comes to shifting the pose, what I mean there is that maybe at the stress, I do need it right now because I do have a problem I need to solve, because a lot of times at work, you do have a problem you need to solve, right? So it's like, okay, I do have a problem I need to solve. Sometimes a fire actually comes up at work, like something breaks and they actually need you. That does happen, in which case the stress is like necessary. But the way I think about it is the pose that I'm holding right now, is it the appropriate pose for this situation? Can I shift it into something else? And I guess a more concrete way of saying that is when I'm feeling stress, am I matching this amount of stress I'm feeling to the problem in front of me, and how can I best channel my energy towards this thing? So I will take that energy and channel whatever I need, right? Whatever I need towards solving the problem, as long as it still feels like it's being productive. And I've actually not talked about this before, but the way I can tell when my stress is being channeled in a productive way is it feels like there is kind of this energy kind of like flowing through me. Like it feels like there's momentum. I don't feel stuck. I feel like there's momentum coming through towards the thing. When I start feeling stuck, like there's energy being blocked in here, right? Um, then that's when I know that there's a mismatch between how much my body thinks I need, how much energy my body thinks I need to deal with this versus how much it actually needs. And that's when I go and I'm like, hey brain, I think that you think that we're in more of a dire situation than we are right now. Let's, I have my blanket here at work. Let's cuddle up. Let's let's remember that we're still alive and we're safe. And now let's see reality. And then I look at the same situation again and do an assessment of, okay, how much how big of a problem actually is this? And once my body's kind of reset, it's able to, like see it more in the scope of reality. And then I'm able to supply the right amount of energy towards whatever that is. But I think the biggest shift for me here is just that I don't see stress as an enemy. I see it as a tool, or not even a tool. I see it as like a very helpful, I don't know, the word that comes up to me is like a child that wants to be there to help you. And this child, I call it a child because because she is not exactly doesn't see things at the level that that I see it. She's there to kind of solve problems, and everything can look like a problem. And but she's there to protect me, right? So my job is not to say, well, you should stop protecting me. You should stop helping me solve problems. Like my job is to set the expectations of does this match what we're doing? What is the amount of, I want my stress to do whatever it needs, but not waste so much energy. I want it to rest too. It needs rest as well, right? So that's how I guess that's how I see it.
So beautiful. Yeah, it's reframing. So when stress is present for me, it gives us superhuman powers, the adrenaline that's released, the way that our limbs are energized, the way that our brain moves really quickly. And this has helped us evolve as a species up until now. And it's amazing. It all happens without our conscious control or conscious kind of direction. I think we can all think of a time where, I'm thinking of a time where I was about to step into the street and a car came by, but something stopped. There was something that happened in my biology that was like, no, don't do that. Maybe it was an angel, who knows? But my body knew, and it wasn't like I had to tell it. So there's these systems in place that help us when we really, really need them. And this is why I say stress can be our friend. And I love how you said stress is here to protect you. So when I feel stress showing up in my body, I simply say, hi, stress. I see that you think I need protection right now, and I don't actually. And then I intercept those responses, because what happens over time is they take a lot of energy and they become unsustainable to exist in that way of being for a long period of time. Let's see what people are saying. So Sharina says, I feel stress in my chest and shoulders. Yes, that's that chest, the chest tightening, the heart's beating really fast, blood vessels are constricting so that blood can be sent to all of your extremities. And then the shoulders, if you think about that, if you were to meet a threat, you need your arm strength to fight that threat or maybe to run. So your muscles do tense in order to help you have strength and agility. The self-care experience by Jem. Stress shows up for me with pain in my body, headaches, back pain, tightness in chest. Yeah. And this could be some, with chronic stress, in the moment, it shows up in these very acute ways of extra strength, psychomotor speed. But over time, if the brain is really, really active, it could cause headaches. If blood flow isn't being evenly distributed throughout the body, it's going to cause certain aches. If the muscles are really, really tense, then you get chronically tense muscles and pain in the muscles. So a lot of this lies within letting the nervous system just have a degree of safety. And this can be done solo sometimes, but sometimes it really helps to have a professional, a therapist, a coach, another, nervous system that you feel safe around, community, friends. Lucy has her blanket, her hot cup of tea. So what's it like to work with the nervous system so that it can be like, okay, the rest and digest part of me can kick on and I can restore all those energy reserves that I have lost throughout, this activation period. Sharina, yes, I love the idea of having a cozy blanket at the ready. I know you inspire me with that too, Lucy. I love it when you pull that out. You just always whip out your cozy blanket and your hot tea.
I actually, let me see if I can show you. I actually have a couch here, and it's got a pillow and a bunch of blankets that ready for me if I need to go and like really bundle up.
I love that. Having a cozy environment, thinking of your environment ahead of time. Like right now, I have a candle lit right now, and it just really soothes me. Maricel says, when I sleep more than 7 to 8 hours, I feel so much better. Yes, getting sleep, because if we don't get proper sleep over time, I mean, this is a whole nother, I think, video, live stream, podcast. One of my previous neuroscience professor is a sleep expert. So I'm thinking of having her on. Actually, I'm not thinking, I know I'm going to have her on, and we're going to ask her all these questions about the importance of sleep. But I do know it really, really helps to recharge the system, and it helps, work with the brain in a way that it can decipher what's a threat and what's not. So getting sleep is really important. So thank you for sharing all of these ways that stress shows up in the body. I love hearing from all of you. How, Lucy, has your view of productivity and in relationship to self-work shifted in the past few weeks? I know you touched on this a little bit in the beginning, but what does productivity look like for you? I mean, I think that's one of the number one things for high achievers. It's like, well, I'm not being productive, so why would I sit down? And we talked about why rest is productive, but how's your view of productivity and self-worth in general shifted?
Yes, it's definitely shifted. And I feel like I think that when we go into module 3, which is about subconscious patterning, I think there's going to be so much can of worms that's going to be open there. But it's already, I in the past, I've tied productivity to my self-worth. And because it feels so good when people say they appreciate you for helping them. It also feels good when, your parents say, oh, look at you, you've got another promo or whatever, right? It feels like all that stuff feels good. And I've come to realize that I call myself a high achiever, but I also call myself a recovering achievement junkie. Mm-hmm. It's almost like I say that because I realized that in the past I was chasing dopamine hits from people and trying to be super productive because that's impressive. And I realized that, and I still want to be appreciated. Don't get me wrong. I still like praise. I'll accept all the praise I can get, but that's not to be confused with actual self-worth, which is something that you can't get from other people. You can only get as much, like you have to give that to yourself. I think I remember when I was like dating, I remember seeing a quote that said like, people can love you only up to the point as much as you love yourself, or something like that. And I think that same thing applies to like self-worth. And one of the things I had realized is that when I am trying to get self-worth from other people, from external things outside of me, not only is that that's just like a temporary hit and it goes away and I like want more, not only is it temporary, but it's actually strengthening this other belief that I can't give it to myself. Like the more I try to get it from other people, the more I give myself evidence that, see, you need it from other people. You can't get it from yourself. When I kind of saw that connection, that changed so much for me. I realized that I'm no longer available for self-abandonment. Like I can't, I have to learn how to give this to myself. Um, and and that by choosing to like I want to be productive because it's fun to get stuff done. It's fun to see my ideas come into reality, right? That's why, like that's like the deeper like at my core what truly lights me up is really that. The self-worth part, I don't need that from other people. That that is something that's always there. It's always available to me, right? Because I'm here. I exist. And one of the things I think we've done, what we've done, Amanda, is you've also given me some affirmations, and these affirmations are continuously evolving too. As I'm like changing, as new things show up, these affirmations are kind of like also changing themselves. We even have like a list of like antidotes, right? It's like our antidote stash, which is like all the affirmations that I can use. And a lot of it is around self-worth, self-approval. Like I love myself, I appreciate me, I trust myself. Trust was such a big one. And the more I start doing that, and like really feeling into it, and then thinking back to all those times when I've like felt really grateful for myself, as that start happening, the self-worth that I'm tying to productivity, it starts getting more disconnected, right? Like being productive is no longer a it's not something I need in order to feel good about myself. Being productive is something that I do in order to get my idea out into reality. And that makes me feel good when that happens. But because it's not tied to self-worth anymore, I'm not, if I'm not productive, right? Or if I'm not as productive as I thought I would be today, you know, I'm not gonna, I don't feel so bad about it, right? Like the thought that comes in, first of all, the chest tightness isn't there as much anymore. But in the past, the thought would be, oh crap, I better do something to get this done now. Like, or else like things will just go haywire and I'm a failure and then I'll die. You know, like it really spirals like out of control. But now the thought that comes is, oh, I guess I underestimated like, how much of other things I wanted to do, or I overestimated how much I can put into this. Well, okay, what should I do for the rest of my schedule to, like, how should I restructure the rest of my schedule to like, well, it's just from a more like detached perspective, right? It's like, okay, I didn't get this thing done today, so what does that mean for the rest of my schedule? Guess it's going to go out like next week or something like that. And it's just like very like, this is the reality, this is what it is. Like there's no like emotional charge attached to it, is the best way I can describe it. And that's great, because I'm pretty sure in the past, when there was an emotional charge attached to it, I wasn't able to get the thing done anyway. And I was stressed out and I felt bad for myself.
Yes.
And I probably ended up spending more time on it. Yes. Because I was like burnt out and stressed out and all of that. Yeah.
100%. And I see this a lot with high achievers, that the motivation for their pursuits has to do with this feeling of belonging. And this can be tied back to nervous system and survival, because, in pre-modern times, we existed more in small communities. And if there was a threat to being kicked out of that community, that was a threat to our survival. So if we feel like our worth and our sense of validation comes from others when we do, whether that's family or whether that's society, then that's a really, really strong belief to have in validation. So there's that sort of kind of archetype that I work with. And there's also an archetype of like, I am just devouring my career so much that I forget my body in the pursuit of these things because it feels so good. And both of these kind of archetypes could benefit from nervous system care, because we all live in bodies with nervous systems, even though, we have souls, we have spirit, we have energy, all of these things, but we also have a nervous system where this energy streams through. And we have this biology that has evolved throughout time that we're interacting with in our everyday reality, whether or not we want to admit that. Let's see what some of you are saying here. I tend to be in survival mode a lot. That is something I'm choosing to release and get back to myself. I love this. And one of the ways I like to reframe this idea of releasing is embracing. So when we feel the stress response there, when we feel that we're in survival, rather than be like, get out, ick, I don't want to feel this, we say, hi, stress, you're here and you're welcome to be here. Thank you for all that you've done for me in the past, but I'm safe in this moment. And so I'm going to lovingly embrace you as a friend and hear your sensations, but choose to feel safe, and then making those choices to help you to calm down. So I love that intention. Living one's entire life in survival mode without realizing it because it was just life. It's so freeing when you can train your brain and body to relax. And I'd love to hear from you, Sharina, like what sorts of things you that have helped you to do that. I think other, people in this conversation would really benefit from that. And anyone who's tuning in, if there are things that you've been able to do to help shift yourself from survival mode into a state of openness, into feeling safe, please do share. We can use all the ideas, whether it's a perspective shift, whether it's an activity, whether it's a habit. It's so freeing to realize that there are so many different ways to live the life of your dreams. And that's really why I do what I do, is because we can be inhabiting this life that looks a certain way from the outside, that is hitting all the boxes of success and achievement. And we're almost on autopilot. We're almost just operating off of conditioning. And in doing so, we're in a state of survival because we're not really conscious in how we're inhabiting our existing life. So understanding the nervous system, carving out time to connect with spirit is a really important way to, your life can look the same, but you're inhabiting it in a different way. And that's really what I love to share with my clients and with my subscribers and all of that stuff. So Lucy, what would, you brought up in the beginning of this conversation that you would often know how to take care of your body after reaching burnout. So you'd reach burnout and then you'd be like, oh, okay, I need to backtrack and now I need to implement some changes in my life. But what have you learned about not reaching that place of burnout in the first place? And like, how do we do this as high achievers who love what we do and might have a hard time for whatever reason tearing ourselves away from it? What does it look like for you? What habits have you implemented? You've talked a lot about perspective shifts, but what are some tangible things? And then again, feel free to share in the chat, in the replay, and the comments if you also are identified high achiever and have found things that work for you.
Yes. I will say that the reason why I had to wait until I reached burnout before I did any sort of recovery measures is because I didn't notice the signs until I get to that point. It'd be like, sometimes it'll get to the point where I literally can't do the work anymore. Like I just notice my brain just stops. And then I'm like, oh, I guess I can't do this. Or I find myself like falling asleep in the middle of the workday. But mainly it's like when I notice I just can't concentrate in my shoulders. Yeah. So I do sometimes it's been such a long time. I don't even have this anymore, but it used to be, I would actually feel shoulder pains. And that tells me that I've been working too much, and then my eyes would get dry. Anyway, so many things, but I'm giving examples of what it meant when my body was screaming at me. Like my eyes would get so dry because I've been looking at the screen for so long, and shoulders get tense. And I knew that by the time that I felt that my body was screaming at me, that's when I was like, oh, I better recover now. But I had a sneaking suspicion that the signs were like already there way earlier on, before my body starts screaming at you. They say, like, with water, the time to drink water is before you get thirsty. By the time you get thirsty, you're actually already dehydrated. Like I felt like that was what was happening. My body was already dehydrated. And I'm like, how can I drink water before I get to that point? And what really helped for me at the start was just implementing some, we call it pockets of recovery, right? Like um, for me, that literally means scheduling it into my work schedule. It's in my work schedule, like Lucy yoga session. Like it's in my work schedule now. So other people in the office can see it if they pull up Lucy's schedule.
Mm.
Where it's like, this is when Lucy does her yoga or whatever the practice is that she wants to do that day. And I have two pockets of time throughout my day, at the beginning of the workday and at the end, or before the workday and at the end of the workday. And during that time, I just do the practice. Like that's it. It's on the schedule, so it's okay. It's safe to do the practice because it's on my schedule. That's like one way to make me feel safe, is to schedule it. And what that has done is that has made me pay attention to what parts of my body feel like when I am under physical stress, because when you're holding those yoga poses, there is physical stress happening. And when I'm doing, especially at the end of a workday, if I'm doing a yoga session, my thoughts are running still from what happened earlier in the day. My heart is probably still pounding from like thinking about something that I haven't finished yet, right? That gets my heart pounding. So like I remember the first like 2 weeks, when I was doing my yoga session, it was so annoying because I'm like, because my heart would just continuously it'd be like problems would show up, and then I'd be holding a pose and trying to like, focus on my breath. But then it's like, my brain would be running and my heart would be pounding. And at a certain point, I just started being like, okay, you know what? I'll just pay attention to what's going on here. I'll try to pay attention to my breath and my brain, what the pounding here and the tightening that's going on in my chest. I'll just pay attention to all of it and just see what happens. And sometimes just by zooming out, these sensations, they kind of go away on their own. But the fact that I was noticing them during my sessions, it helped me be able to notice them when I'm not doing my sessions. Because I think what happened was I got so intimate with how it feels like in my chest when I'm like thinking about a stressful situation. When I'm not trying to problem solve at the same time, because all I'm doing is holding downward dog and I'm feeling this chest tightening. I'm like, oh, that's what it feels like. That when I'm doing work and I see an email and I start feeling that chest tightening, like I notice it so much. I notice it so much more easily now because I'm noticing it. And when I notice it, I think this is another thing I ended up doing, was that when I noticed it, instead of like ignoring it, like the moment I noticed it, I like stop doing whatever I'm doing. And I'm just like, and I just sit there and I just pay attention to it. And the more, I think like the more I do that, the more I think it's like at practice, it's like almost like practicing your awareness muscles. It's like going to the gym and like lifting, it's like, I feel like I'm practicing my awareness muscles. And the more I practice that awareness, the more easily I can be aware of that. Like even in a meeting or in a client call, I can notice that happening. And like I can do a breath exercise in that moment, and that'll help, and I haven't gone to that burnout mode in the past couple of weeks, which is great. Yeah.
That's beautiful. And that's what really module 1 of my Work Deliciously program is all about. It's understanding the nervous system in a really scientific, informational way, and then understanding how that knowledge applies directly into the body. So I often say I do applied neuroscience because I work with scientists who know the information with their head, but I'm like, you actually have a nervous system too, and your nervous system interacts with life, and we should talk about that. So what I'm hearing you say is that you are able to, through that nervous system education, through this reflection, through scheduling pockets of time to connect with it and build this relationship with your body, you're able to track your nervous system throughout your day and intercept the stress response before you reach a state of burnout and depletion, which is an amazing skill to have. It's so beautiful. Nice work.
Yes. That, I think you nailed it. That's exactly what it is. I think that's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Let's see what some people are saying about what works for them. Leaving an abusive relationship for one. That's a great one. So removing an external stressor. And we worked with this, like what stressors around us have a direct influence on us that we can actually release, that we can shift, that we can change. And that's different than an internal stressor of a thought pattern or a belief system. Recognizing my triggers, that's great. So knowing there's a lot of empowerment that comes when we know what triggers us. So if there's a person or if there's a situation or if there's a social media channel or a website or environment that triggers us, just knowing that and going in, we can enter into that situation if we choose with awareness that will be triggered and recognizing what stress feels like in my body. Bingo. I think if you're watching this live on the replay, taking some time and in noticing how stress shows up in your body in a physiological way so that you can notice it. And like Lucy said, talk to it, lovingly embrace it. Say, hi, I see that you're here. I don't need to run away from you. You have a purpose. You serve a purpose. In this moment, you don't need to be here, but thank you for showing up. For my triggers, I journal to figure out why it bothers me. Yes. So taking that time and reflection. For my body, I take time away from my stressor and breathe. We haven't even talked about breath. There's so many breath exercises, and all of my clients get access to my Science and Magic membership portal. And I have a plethora of classes, yoga, meditation, breath exercises, self-massage. We have EFT tapping from myself and a wide array of different instructors. And so I curate those classes for the client that I'm working with to customize the program for them. So breath, yes. I mean, it can just also be a simple deep, you could place your hand on your heart, your hand on your belly, and see if you can feel your breath in both of those places. Just saying the thing out loud and having that conversation with God in the moment is so life-giving for me. I talk to the universe like I am talking to someone in front of me, and the answers come. Oh, Lucy, I feel like you can respond to that one. You do such a good job of that.
I do. And I talk to everything.
Yes.
Somebody would like, oh my God. Sometimes I think if like somebody finds my journal, they'll like think I'm a crazy person with like multiple personality disorder or like dissociative disorder or something. Cause I was like, I'll talk to the universe. I'll talk to my body. I'll talk to literally a body part at a time. And then I will journal out what they're saying back to me. Mm-hmm. So my whole journal is like a giant conversation with like all the different parts of Lucy. Because, when I say I talk to the universe, that's actually a part of me too. It's like the way I think about it. It's like, it's all a part of me. And it's very, very, it's very cool. I totally relate to this comment is that, when I talk, I get the answers a lot of times. The answers come when, and sometimes I will talk to the universe. Sometimes I will just talk to myself, just like, hey, me. Sometimes I'll talk to my future self. That's also a thing I tend to do. The Lucy that's already finished doing, has already finished resolving whatever the problem is, right? I'll talk to her and be like, what did you do? Or it's like, how does it, what do I need to do? What do you need to, or what did you do? What do you have any advice for me? Like sometimes I'll just like have that kind of conversation. And then when they talk back to me, I'll often, if I don't, either I get the exact answer I need, or it's not the exact answer. Because sometimes what comes back is, I can't tell you right now because you're going to misinterpret it. But what I will tell you is like, relax, it'll come, or something like that. Like a lot of times, like that's the answer. And so it's not the exact answer, but it is like it's like there's something actionable to do or be or say. And that helps. And sometimes I will talk to the specific body part, like, hey, chest, what do you need? And sometimes it doesn't want to tell me, but it wants my attention. So I'm just like, okay, you have my full attention. You don't need to tell me anything, but you have my full attention. And then there was one time that this happened where I that exact situation happened. And then as soon as I was like, okay, you don't have to tell me anything, but I'll just, I'll give you my attention. And then the tightness just instantly dispersed. And it was so fascinating. And I couldn't even get it back, even if I like wanted to try. Like I recall the memory that was triggering it, and there was no more emotional, there was no like emotional charge attached to that. And I was just like, oh my God, I don't know what happened, but that's awesome. So yeah, I find that journaling has been really helpful in that regard. It really gets me out of my head, out of my problem solving, out of that like so focused, like tunnel vision mode, where I think this goes back to the whole like when you're in that tunnel vision mode, you're not, it's hard to be creative. You're not seeing the answers or hearing the answers that could be out there. So I think it's like when I'm having a conversation with other parts of me, it allows me to kind of access answers that I can't get from just my tunnel vision brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if we bring this back to, we're running in the woods from a mountain lion on a hike.
Yeah.
Well, chances are we're not thinking spiritually about like, okay, broader picture, universe, maybe, I've never been chased by a mountain lion, but in the moments where we are hyper stressed because of the threat in our environment, we are more focused on the actual physical matter that's around us. We're focused on how are we going to get out of this situation? We're focused on material things. So when we shift our perspective by when we're even open to prayer, when we're open to calling the universe in, when we're open to journaling, that by definition is consciously moving the nervous system out of a state of survival and into an openness through a perspective shift. And so I love this topic. Now we're coming kind of to the end of this. If you're still tuned in and you have any final questions or any comments for either Lucy or I, please feel free to share. And in the meantime, I want to give Lucy a chance to offer any advice to high achievers. So you going through this module 1 of the Work Deliciously program, and you have 3 more left, and we'll be doing a live stream for each of those 3. So we have 3 more left. But for this one, regarding what you know about stress around the nervous system, around nervous system activation, rest and productivity, what advice would you give fellow high achievers, high performers, knowing what you know now and experiencing what you've experienced?
Yeah, that's a very big question. And I feel like I think that we've covered a lot of the advice that I would give. But I think that if I had one piece of advice, it would really be to set aside any time. It could be 5 minutes or even 10 minutes, any amount of time to get to know how your nervous system responds to stress, if you don't know, right? Because I do think that knowing what that feels like was the single most biggest helpful factor in helping me catch myself before I fell down that hole, that spiral back into actually it serves 2 purposes. It helps you be aware of what stress may look like for you. Sorry, let me actually correct that. It helps you be aware of that, but it also helps you be aware of what rest feels like. I can't believe I didn't mention this. When I did those rest and recovery moments through my schedule, I also learned what rest and recovery felt like. I was like, I never really paid attention to what my body feels like when it's resting, like in that final savasana pose, right? That's I'm like, oh, this is what rest feels like. I think that a lot of high achievers who are constantly in survival mode, in like this low grade survival mode, we don't really know what rest feels like. And until we know what rest feels like and experience that contrast, it's harder to catch yourself when you're getting pulled into that survival mode. And then the second thing with having just any kind of pocket of recovery throughout the day is just from a biological perspective. You and I have talked about how in the past, historically when humans would go through periods of like high stress, like, they need food now or like, escape a predator. And then periods of like recovery, active recovery, where they did that. And now we're in this constant state of low grade stress, but with no recovery time. So I would say if you add just like pockets of recovery throughout your day, and it could be 10 minutes a day to start, and then expand that. I'm trying to expand my pocket right now. We only did 15-minute yoga sessions as to start. And during that time, it could be yoga, it could be breath work, it could be self-massage. It might take some trial and error to figure out what's something that resonates with you. But then once you figure it out that, adhere to that for like, like a few weeks, I would say, just to get used to what it feels like to be resting. And then you have that contrast of what it feels like to be stressed. And I think there's so much wisdom to be gained out of that, that I think can only come through experience.
I love that. Know what stress feels like and know what rest feels like.
Yes.
And then carve out time for your nervous system to flip into that rest and digest state and to feel safe. As often as you can, implement new habits, figure out what that thing is for you to do. Nap, meditation, yoga, sauna, whatever it is, cuddling on a warm blanket on the couch. Get support around you. And then eventually, what we will work on, continue through this program, is what is it like to work from a state of rest so that they're not two separate things. But I love this, like find something that works for you and then continue to implement it in your schedule. I appreciate you both. Thank you, Lucy, for sharing your experiences and doing this work. Thank you so much, Lucy, for being on this live stream. This is my first live stream ever, so I will always remember this. And I know we struggled with the first one last week, but I think we made a recovery here. And you're being very generous with your time and sharing your experience and your process with everyone, because I think having these conversations is really what's going to change culture, both individually in our own lives and then on a broader scale. Just let's talk about it. What does this look like to work in a way that's delicious and won't lead to burnout? So if you're interested, Lucy's actually filming more about her process throughout the 6 months, both within the context of working with me and then outside of it. And she is, I've linked her YouTube channel below. So definitely click that. If you're interested in working with me, I would love to set up a connection call with you. I have a link below in the details. And that can just be, I get to know a little bit about you and you can hear more about what it's like to work with me. I also have a link to the Work Deliciously program that Lucy's going through in the show notes too. So thank you again so much for tuning in, for participating and sharing your thoughts, ideas, questions. And we'll see you in the next live stream. Lucy and I should be on in the next month or so. So thank you so much.
Thank you.